Partners Educational Development. I'm talking to Leo Melamed. He is CME Chairman Emeritus. He's also the father of the IMM. He's also the father of modern currency trading, and also author of the book Escape to the Futures. On behalf of AMP Educational Partners, Leo, thank you so much for having me here. And we're going to take this in 3 parts. The questions I'm going to ask, I'll go through them pretty quick, because I know you're a very busy man. Part 1, growing up as a child in Bialystok. How was that? Was it idyllic growing up, youth, before the troubles?
Well, life was normal. I was a child going to kindergarten in Bialystok, and had my friends, as normal kids do all over the world. And I don't remember very much because it was all before the 7th birthday, which occurred, and then, of course, the world went crazy.
Right. Okay. Now, as a child, just in those 7 years before the world went crazy, tell me some of your favorite games that you played with the kids your age.
Well, it was, a lot of it was make-believe things that we made up. So it was not games you would recognize. It was things that kids make up, and the kind of cops and robbers and soldiers and that kind of thing on the street. I really don't remember a great deal of it.
Okay. I was wondering if you had any particular favorite game that you came up with a strategy to beat your friends, but I know it was such a long time ago. And then
none that I recall.
Okay. So your schooling, was that cut pretty short? Did you have a favorite subject before?
No. I never got to 1st grade because on September 1st, just before I was going to enter 1st grade, the Germans invaded Poland.
Okay.
And from then forward, I couldn't go to school for normalcy for a long time.
Okay. All right. So then, was your education then completed on the home front by your parents?
As we traveled along, my parents became my tutors in formal education, and they would try to, substitute for a school.
Right.
At times when we stayed, like in Wilno, for a period of time, not knowing where we would go next, they enrolled me in school, so that I was in schools actually in Wilno, and later when that turned Russian, it was a Russian school, first a Lithuanian school, and then I was taught or attempted to learn Russian.
Yeah.
Then later than that, we entered, when we went to Japan, they enrolled me again in a Japanese school.
Okay.
And it was all very temporary.
Yeah.
Until I finally got to the States, where I was enrolled in real school.
Okay. So when you were in Japan, were you able to pick up the language for the brief amount of time? Did you have to use it?
I was only in Japan for 4 months.
Okay.
And I'm good, but not that good.
Right. Okay. All right. Now, as a child, were you aware of the impending danger that was coming, or is it something your parents were like, hey, we have to go now? Was it kind of like one of those things?
Well, the whole business of war was more for adults than kids, so that I did not participate in decisions of when we had to leave. We were captured by the Nazis, and the leaving was something that my parents arranged, and privately, because they didn't want anybody to know, nor did I know. Mm-hmm. All I knew was that my mother one evening took me by the hand and said, we're leaving for Lithuania, and you have to leave with me.
Right.
She packed a small bag, and we left.
Right. Did you travel by carts, or did you travel by cart, train?
This trip from Bialystok to Lithuania was in a train, but the train didn't actually make it there all the time. I mean, straight, because it stopped quite often when there were bombings of the tracks and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And so sometimes we would have to get off the train and get back on. But theoretically, it took us to Wilno on the train.
Okay. And then you eventually met back up with your father?
Yes.
You were reunited? Okay. And then the Shiyun Sugihara? Sugihara. His significance, can you explain that?
Well, Sugihara was a very noble man and courageous, because he was the Japanese consul general to Lithuania in Kovno. Kovno was then the capital of Lithuania, and he was besieged by the refugees, all Jews, who were trapped with nowhere to go and with danger coming to catch them, and so he was besieged to issue entry visas, temporary visas to Japan. And his government, at the time, the Foreign Service, told him, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't want to get involved. He asked again and again, and they gave him the same answer. And finally, he took it upon himself to issue the visas.
He went over their heads.
Well, theoretically, a consul general for a nation is like the nation's king.
Okay.
I mean, at that moment, he could do whatever he wanted to. He had the authority.
Right.
His signature counted. So he didn't listen to them, and he issued something on the order of 4,500 visas.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So almost like his counterpart would have been like an Oscar Schindler.
Well, actually, he was more than Oscar Schindler,
yeah,
because of the sheer amount of visas he issued, plus the fact that he had no commercial reason to save these people that we were refugees in trouble.
Right.
It was, in fact, he went against government orders to do so. So, in my view, he was a stronger figure than even Oscar Schindler.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I did read that part in your book, and that was very, very intriguing. Okay, so now you leave Japan, you come to the States, Chicago, beautiful city. What was your first impression when you landed here? The sights, the sounds, the smells.
Well, I had landed first. Actually, we landed on the West Coast, from Japan.
Right.
So we landed in Seattle, Washington. And then we trained a 4-day train ride to New York. My mother had a sister in New York. And from New York, we then came to Chicago. But the real impression of America came when we landed in New York, obviously.
Yeah.
And the impression was overwhelming. It was like being on a different planet from what I had been used to, and what I had seen. The buildings that, reaching the sky,
yeah,
and people talking, of course, in another language. That I was used to already, but
the
throngs of people,
yeah,
and the amount of activity and the rapidity and so forth was all brand new. So getting to Chicago was not that much different.
Right.
It isn't as big a city, but to a little kid, it didn't make much difference whether the buildings were 100 stories or only 50 or 60.
Right.
So I took Chicago in stride as not a new event. I had already broken the ice, as it were,
okay,
in New York, and Chicago was just simply an extension of American
If you can
life.
deal with New York, Chicago's like.
It's like Frank Sinatra said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did he say?
You can do it there. You can do it
anywhere. Right. Excellent. So Humboldt Park, not family neighborhood.
It's Humboldt Park was where we settled. It's mid Chicago, and it was a mixed neighborhood. There was a Jewish contingent, Italian contingent, Polish, and a mixture of other nationalities. So there wasn't
It's a big melting pot.
It was a melting
Yeah,
pot. Yeah, it really was.
So then you went to high school, and obviously as you're growing older, you've got your group of friends that you run with. Describe a time when you had to use your, because all teenagers, especially boys, get in scrapes and trouble. What was a time that you had to get yourself out of trouble? Like, I didn't want to get in trouble at home. I got to use my wits to either get away from the neighborhood bully or something like that.
Well, there were many instances. First of all, I lived through a period of time when anti-Semitism was very virulent, and in the neighborhood, you would sometimes run into some bullies and kids that would call you names and so forth and so on. And I was not a frightened kid. I had gone through holy hell to get here.
Right.
So it isn't like
you're going to scare easy.
I would scare easy or run away. So I always stood up and, gave the lumps as many times as I received them. So that was a period of time where it was a big lesson in life because I had never run into that before. Also, by the time I got to high school, I was already acclimated enough to go into business. So me and a couple of friends ordered firecrackers for the 4th of July celebrations, but they were against the law. So you couldn't just walk in a store and buy them, but you could in Indiana. So we went and got
over the border.
And we used to sell them. It was our first
entrepreneurial.
And of course we were caught.
What happened when you got caught?
Some kids got caught by police.
Yeah.
Police asked them where they got them. They said, "Yep." and they found me, and I didn't deny it because it was silly to deny it. And they didn't do anything. They just brought me to my parents. And
back then, parents carried a lot of weight. Like, I'm going to tell your father, and then you're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Father was very upset.
Yes.
But, we got over it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So now you're on your way to college. Did you decide right away that you wanted to pursue law?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No,
was that after?
That was a little later. I started University of Illinois Chicago, UIC. That was the beginning, and the reason I did that is because it was $50 a semester. I was also accepted to Harvard, but that was $5,000 a semester. So I knew where I was going.
Yeah.
And a bunch of us were going there because of the different cost structure. This was a great experience because it turned into a very, very good school, as you know.
Yes.
UIC is a very respected institution. I was there at the very beginning of that, where Mayor Daley, the father of this last Mayor Daley, had instituted a program for the GIs returning from the war.
Okay.
And they had to have a place to learn and study. So he created the UIC for that purpose.
Okay.
And of course, I was, it didn't say you had to be a returning veteran. You just had to be a certain age.
Right.
And I fit that. So we all registered for our college in UIC, but I didn't register knowing what I wanted to be. Most kids don't.
Yeah.
Even today.
Right. Okay.
It comes later with a year or two under your belt. You kind of know what you want to do.
Yeah. My son's going through that right now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So so you finished college. Is that when you went to law school after 4 years of college?
After college, I went to John Marshall Law School.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was an inner city school.
Yeah.
Great school, absolutely great school. And I got actually a doctor of law, so you can call me doctor, but no.
Right. Dr. Melamed.
No.
Where? I did not know that. Okay. So you're in law school. Had you graduated and become a lawyer? You obviously graduated, and then that's when you found the floor, or was that
No. I found the Chicago Mercantile Exchange floor when I entered law school, I was looking for a job for clerking for a law firm.
Okay.
And the job I saw was Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Bean.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know that wasn't the law firm. It sure sounded like a law firm. A lot of names.
Right.
And so I went to apply for the job. I got the job. And then I found out that it wasn't the law firm. In fact, it was the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
Okay.
And that wasn't the law firm at all. But I loved it. So
yeah. So they said you're hired. You need to report here. You walk into the trading floor, and what did you see?
It was like in Alice in Wonderland, and it was a complete surprise. And I, of course, realized what it was, and it wasn't the law firm. But I liked what I was seeing, and after all, I got a job, and they were paying me $25 a week, so there's a lot of money.
Yeah, back then, yeah.
Yeah, very happy to get it.
Yeah, okay. So you're a runner, and you're working your way through the ranks. Any memories that said to you, hey, I want to step in the ring and do this?
Well, it was almost immediate. I loved the idea of the risk and danger of trading. And I understood very quickly how the market worked and what its purpose was. And I, became immersed in it to a point of a love affair. It was instant and it was automatic. And I knew that I would still end up as a lawyer.
Yeah.
I wasn't about to quit school. But I really wanted to do this.
Okay.
And
did your parents have any kind of conflicts? Like, hey, you should get distracted?
My parents wanted me to definitely finish law.
Yeah.
That was a big thing to them. And I promised I would and did. And I practiced for about 10 years. But during the time of practice, I was always doing half this and half that.
Yeah.
And running from a deposition or from a motion in court to the pits of the Merc. And, you couldn't be much of a trader doing that. I realized very quickly that trading required a full-time attention.
Yeah.
And so eventually, after almost 10 years of practice, I gave up the practice alone.
Okay. So you're in the pork bellies. That's where you made your name. So tell me about Lee. Every trader has, once you put that coat and badge on, what was your mindset like? How did you get in your game? How did you prepare when you stepped into the trading ring? What did you look at?
Most traders concentrate on one or two of the markets. They don't try to know all the markets. Some do, but mostly you concentrate on what you're trading in.
Right.
In my case, it was pork belly. So I did do my homework.
Okay.
I did study the supply-demand statistics and all the other nuances of the hog market because it's part of a hog. It's uncured bacon, the pork belly.
Yeah.
And I learned all of that. And I also knew I studied charting, how the markets move. Technical analysis. There weren't that many. There wasn't any books that related to futures, but there were many books relating to stocks and securities.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that the markets worked that much differently, so I would study the books of the securities market. I read anything I could get my hands on to go through this learning process, and I think I did a pretty good job. Later on, when I became chairman, this is getting ahead of your question.
No, go ahead.
Eventually, I ran for the board after I gave up full-time practice of law.
Right.
And decided to pin my hopes on being a trader. But then afterwards, I got interested in the exchange itself.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, your foray into exchange politics. What was it? What did you want to implement change? What was it that fascinated you?
Well, you got to know
about that
the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that I entered in the late 50s and early 60s, when I was a runner, and then later on a phone clerk, was an exchange that was not with any great reputation.
Okay.
The exchange would allow what is known as corners and squeezes
Yeah.
in the market, which is manipulation
Yeah.
and really against the law. But that era,
That's how it was then.
it was, and it was like the robber barons of what you read about. And they ran the exchange. They took advantage of everything they could take advantage of, and it had a very bad reputation. So I witnessed all that as a young member, and it's when I started to believe that they were killing their opportunity, and I knew that the exchange had foundation that could do much better.
Right.
So I organized with the help of a couple other younger elements.
This is when you're known as the Young Turks, right?
The Young Turks.
Yeah.
We organized what was known as the Broker Club, which was just a facade to we were really revolutionaries,
right.
but we didn't call ourselves revolutionaries. And what we were doing is trying to figure out how we could influence the exchange and make it better. And that was the nature of the purpose of ours getting together. And eventually, that's what happened.
Yeah.
We caused a revolt at the exchange. We had an election where I was elected to the board, and so were a couple others who had been on the Brokers Club.
Okay.
And we started to make a difference.
Wow. Okay. Did the change affect the seed prices at all, or did they?
No, it was all internal.
Okay.
Seed prices are based on volume, and so if you make money or you don't, it's a volume thing.
Right.
And so the internal machinations of administration weren't really. It's not like today, a Wall Street Journal story. Remember, this was a very small institution. It's hard to visualize the CME today, the smallness of what it was then.
This is 110 Franklin, right?
It's 110 North Franklin.
Yeah.
It trades now. It started at butter eggs, then it lost the onions. Onions was a great trade, and that was an example
of they ran it into the ground.
What the exchange was like, where they let the onions create a manipulation of sorts that eventually the farmers petitioned the government to outlaw onion future.
Yeah.
And there is a law on the books that you can't have onions market.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's hard to visualize how small that institution was.
I've seen the pictures.
Even if when you compare it to the Board of Trade, which was the grain exchange, and that was the big brother exchange on the street, and truly a many, many times bigger institution than the CME was.
Right. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I've seen pictures of it, and just that small exchange. It looks like only a handful of members, but there's a lot of business that was running through there at that time. A lot of opportunity.
I don't know. There were many, many quiet periods. I don't think it was a lot of opportunity because they were trading in butter and eggs, and both of those went out of business.
Yeah.
The butter and the eggs. And then they tried pork bellies, and that seemed to work.
Yeah.
So they thought they'd stay with the meat complex, and they instituted a hog futures and a cattle futures. That was better.
Yeah.
But still in all, it wasn't what one would call a great deal of business.
Okay.
It was sporadic and growing, but sporadic.
Okay. So now as chairman, was one of your first duties, were you starting to look for new markets, new opportunities for the exchange?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I knew that the exchange to succeed would have to diversify. And so I was very much on the hunt for different kinds of product.
Okay.
We tried turkeys, we tried potatoes, we tried shrimp and oranges.
Yeah.
None of them worked,
right.
but I would keep trying.
Okay.
And the good thing about America is that they don't punish you
for keep trying.
failing and trying again. So, but inside of me there was an idea that we ought to try something really brand new,
Right.
which is in finance, and that was currency market.
Okay.
And that once that idea germinated inside of me, nothing else mattered.
Right. Was it really born on like a napkin, on a dinner napkin with Milton Friedman?
No.
Okay,
No,
so it was
not.
Yeah.
That's
They like to mythologize.
a lot of myths about that.
Right.
No. The idea was, born inside of me, and the only thing is that when I suggested it to the board, I was very young for what I was doing. I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
The rest of the board was in their 130s.
Right.
So when I came up with this idea of trading in currencies, they literally laughed me out of the room because they explained that futures, I may not know it, but futures are meant for agriculture, not for finance.
Right.
And besides that, for this little Baywater exchange to trade in finance is to like an insult. It's to the world. And
no one's going to come and take you seriously in this little upstart exchange. Right.
And so Milton Friedman came in the picture because I decided there was only one way I could convince that the idea was good.
Mm-hmm.
If I could get some verification from somebody with authority in economics. Remember, I was a lawyer, not an economist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so the only one I needed to think of was Milton Friedman, whose lectures I'd gone to hear many times in the course of the last few years and so I called him for an appointment, and we met.
Okay.
We actually met in New York because he was on his way to vacation, and I asked him, we met at the Waldorf Astoria for breakfast. It was lunch, and I asked him not to laugh at me,
right.
and he promised he wouldn't laugh. And I asked him if he thought a futures market in currency was a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, he was instantly
his interest
instantly agreed.
Yeah.
He said, that's a wonderful idea. You must do it. So it was a shocking kind of response to me that this great man would agree. And I questioned him because I said, but you understand, this is finance and futures, not agriculture and futures. Will it work? If we said it shouldn't make any difference.
Yeah, what kind of market?
Same elements that go into agriculture are applied to finance in terms of how the market works. So I said, nobody's going to believe me that you said that.
Yeah.
And he said, well, just tell him. And I said,
that's
no.
not going to do it.
That's not going to do it. I need it in writing.
Yeah.
He said, would you like a feasibility study? I said, that's it.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what a feasibility study was. He says, well, that'll cost you some. I said, how much? We settled on $7,500.
Right, I remember this, yeah.
And the $7,500 got me a feasibility study, which I used to advance the idea and prove to people all over the world that it wasn't just me with this idea, but here's this great economist of the 20th century, the greatest of the 20th century.
And he's saying that it can be done.
Saying it's a good idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so today the Merck is worth some $22 billion.
Yeah.
I consider that a pretty good trade.
I think so, yeah. That's great, yeah. Okay, so you go to the membership and you say we're going to launch the International Monetary Market, and they're all cheering for it, or were there some detractors?
No. The way it went is the Merck itself had 500 members.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all that there was allowed to sell memberships. I wanted a separate institution because I was trying to invite a different element, not cattle traders and not belly traders and not butter traders. I wanted to invite people that would be more or less younger than that and would hang their hat on markets in currencies or other financial instruments. So I thought that to do that, you should launch a separate institution. Of course, it would be an adjunct of the CME because I didn't have any extra money than the CME. And I called it the IMM, the International Monetary Market, and we sold membership into the IMM for a lot less money. A membership in the CME at that time was about $100,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in the IMM, my price was $10,000.
Oh, so you could get it for a fraction of the price.
I was also looking for a younger element that could afford it. Younger element couldn't afford $100,000. But $10,000, somehow they could scrape up.
Yeah.
And they did. They borrowed and so forth, as I did. And so the old guard membership at the CME, most of them were not that happy with it because these young kids were coming in using their space, their chalk, because all the things were marked on the blackboard. So you use chalk.
Can you imagine they fall over a piece of chalk? You can't use that for your market.
The chalk was a problem.
Yeah.
Hey, the breathing of the air was a problem. You know. Who were these guys?
Yeah.
So the only way I could do that is if I gave a membership to every existing CME member for free, $100.
Yeah.
So we had to establish a price, the lawyers told me.
Okay.
So we established $100. So for $100, the other guys have to pay $10,000. You only have to pay $100.
Right.
That was appealing to the old guard, and they all bought a membership for $100 and became members. That made it more palatable to, it was a political move, really.
Right. But now they have a vested interest in this new fledgling exchange.
Yeah. Eventually, a few years later, I realized that there was a body of CME members that were never going to use foreign exchange or any financial instrument, and they would be an enemy to the growth of the IMM. And so I decided in 1976, so that's like 4 years after the launch of the IMM, that we had to merge them. I had to merge the CME and the IMM so that no one could pull it apart and throw it away.
Right.
The IMM was still very young and no real money and had no home. It was using the floor of the mercantile exchange.
Yeah.
And that merger, I think, saved the day because it had to be a referendum to merge, but the referendum won and the institution became what is today CME.
Wow, that's something I never get tired of hearing it. It's so great, the history, and it's so rich. At this time, I did run across a book called The Asylum about the birth of the global oil markets. So during that time, you were also kind of traveling from here to New York to try to see if you could get a crude oil contract here too.
Well, actually, that's different. I was traveling to New York because all our customers, a great deal of them, were New York entities and big institution banks and so forth. And it was necessary for me to meet with them and kind of sell the idea of trading in futures, in currencies, and later interest rates. The crude oil contract was started in New York by the New York Mercantile Exchange. NYMEX. Yeah. And it was their idea. They started it. I was busy with so many other things because we were launching treasury bills and then we were launching certificates of deposit and all kinds of things that had to do with finance. And so by the time we got around to thinking about crude oil and the like, they had already started their market.
They had it pretty well established.
And I didn't believe we could wrest it away from them because I believed if you got a head start in a new market and you didn't do anything really dumb, you would hang on to it. And they did hang on to it. We tried. We tried for a time, a couple of years, but it didn't work, and I knew it wouldn't work. So I was happy, actually, that they succeeded because it gave us almost like another partner in the game, and the game was difficult because the world wasn't sure of futures yet, especially outside of agriculture. And so they were an offshoot of the same thing that I was doing.
Yeah.
So it was good to have someone also thinking the same way I did, and that's how the crude oil markets succeeded.
Okay. And so we had the gold pit here for a short time too. Did you?
We tried gold.
Yeah.
But that was a very big long shot, a terrible long shot, because the COMEX was the metals exchange by then.
Yeah.
And it had connections to the metals traders and to the metals dealers that we didn't have in Chicago. Chicago was so far removed from that.
Oh, okay. I thought Maury had went out and established. I thought he had established inroads into those dealers and so forth.
We tried.
Okay.
And we did, so that for about 3 or 4 years we were pretty close head to head in trading. But ultimately we lost it to the volume of the COMEX, and that was a tough loss because I worked very, very hard to make it work.
Right.
I'd gone to London many times. I had brought dealers to Chicago, the gold dealers, you know.
Yeah.
We went to visit gold dealers in London. You know, I put in the full bore effort on winning the gold market because it's a big market, you know, it's a great market. But I couldn't do it. The ties, like I said, you know, if you're first and you have the roots in the beginnings of whatever plant it's going to be,
it makes it very hard to
very hard. So by you know, it began in like '76, and by 1980 we lost it.
Okay.